The Bliss Business Podcast, the show about empathy, connection, and consciousness in business. Today's episode is brought to you by Zero Company, your paid search, social media, and programmatic ad experts.
Well, having a little bit of internet issues here, but welcome back to the show, everyone. Hopefully I'll be staying with you. Everything froze up there for a second on me, but we'll see. But anyway, let's get rolling here. Turnover, disengagement, hiring mistakes remain some of the most costly problems in business. Gallup estimates disengaged employees cost U.S. companies nearly $1.9 trillion each year. Yet most CEOs react to these challenges instead of measuring them with the same discipline they use for finance or operations. So today we are exploring what every CEO needs to know about workplace and workforce ROI and how to uncover hidden profit drains. Tullio, introduce our guest today.
My pleasure. That's a lot of cheddar being lost out there for sure. So our guest today is Mason Duchatschek. I hope I did it right, Mason.
You nailed it, Tullio.
Mason's a best-selling author, workforce strategist, and is the founder and CEO of Workforce Alchemy. Mason created a decision support tool that helps CEOs expose hidden profit leaks tied to turnover, disengagement, and misalignment. His work has been featured in Selling Power, Entrepreneur Magazine, and the New York Times. He's co-authored People Matter Most and Inclusive Leadership, bestsellers that highlight how workforce decisions shape the business outcomes. Mason, so excited to have you. Welcome to the show. We're looking forward to digging in and learning from you today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So Mason, let's get right to where do most CEOs kind of unknowingly bleed profit when it comes to their workforce, and why do they not see it?
Well, there's a lot of them, but I'm going to focus on the two biggest ones: turnover and employee engagement. And the challenge is that they don't see this stuff because it doesn't show up on a P&L. Their accountants can't point it out. And the employees don't really want to say anything because everyone knows it's the messenger that gets shot. So how do you address the stuff? Well, let me just give you a couple examples. I was doing some research and I found out that it costs about 16%. Let's just start on turnover and then we'll talk about engagement. It costs about 16% of a person's annual salary to replace them. So it costs, if they're an hourly employee. If it is a salaried employee, you're looking at about 21% of their annual salary to replace them. And if it's an executive level position, you're looking at about 150 to 213% of their annual salary to replace them. So let's do an example. For if it's an hourly employee and they make $40,000 a year, then that's $6,400 per hiring mistake. You lose one of those, that's 6,400 people or $6,400. If you lost 50 of them, that's $320,000 a year just in turnover costs. You start going up to salaried employees. Let's say your average salaried employee makes $65,000 a year. Every time you lose one of those guys, it's 21% of their salary. So you're talking about $13,650. You lose 50 of those people, you're talking $682,000. I mean, those are huge profit leaks that businesses aren't aware of. And honestly, I don't even think that's the biggest issue. I think employee engagement's even a bigger profit leak. And the reason I say that, you guys are familiar with the Gallup surveys. I saw one, I know there's a recent one out that makes the numbers even worse, but the last one I saw, it said that about 16.5% of the population, working population, is actively disengaged, hostile, trying to cause problems. They can't stand their employer and they want to do damage. Wow. About 52% are disengaged. And what do I mean by disengaged? Sleepwalking through the day, coasting by, doing enough not to get fired. That leaves about 31.5% left that are actively engaged in trying to build the business. And you start doing the math on that. Let's just say that same $40,000 a year employee is going half speed, cruising by, doing enough not to get fired. If you're paying them $40,000 and they're doing $20,000 worth of work, that's costing you $20,000 for an hourly employee, one hourly employee. You start talking about salaried employees, that makes $65,000 cruising by at half speed, you're losing $32,500 per employee that you let cruise by at half speed. I had a client in Louisiana not too long ago. He had a payroll of about 10 million. And I asked him, I said, what is the discretionary effort of your average employee? And it was an exceptional company. So his estimates were higher than this. He said, Mason, I think about 60%. I said, so you're telling me you've got 10 million in payroll, but your people are only going at 60%. So you're getting $6 million worth of work for that. So that sounds like about a $4 million a year profit leak. He's like, oh yeah. And I said, and we met that afternoon with his frontline supervisors, and I asked them the same question. The ones that were, now that was the owner, asked the frontline supervisors who are dealing with employees on the front lines every day. So what do you think the discretionary average effort of your average employee is? They said 35%. This guy is making millions of dollars a year. And I asked him, I said, let's just say that it's in the middle. Let's call it 50%. It said, if someone was embezzling $5 million a year from you, how long would you wait to fix it? He goes, I'd fix it right away. I go, what are you waiting for? He goes, I didn't know. I didn't know. So I created on my website, people can use, if they go to workforcealchemy.com, you don't even have to opt in. You don't have to put in the email. I literally have the password to access it there, but you can go in and literally plug in. And executive numbers are way worse. I just talked about hourly and salary employees. You start talking about executive level positions, it's much more carnage. But anyway, if you want to find out exactly what it's costing you so you don't have to guess, you can plug in these numbers because it's not on your P&L. Your accountants can't point it out. And your employees sure aren't going to say anything about it. So that's one way for you to understand exactly how big some of these challenges are.
We're speaking the same language quite often, Mason. I look at it even this way, because sometimes people just look at numbers, it doesn't sink in. It's like with the latest Gallup polls at 31% productivity. That's the equivalent of your employees working 3 months out of the year, and the next 9 months they get to go home. And somehow that's acceptable by boards and even Wall Street, because most companies are operating at that capacity. So 9 months out of the year, just send everybody home and pay them for the full year. So that's exactly what's happening. It's an epidemic, and it's not the people's fault, obviously.
So you're hitting on something there. I don't blame the CEOs or the business owners either, because they don't know this exists. You can't solve problems that you don't know exist. So they don't know, like I said, but they're still responsible for it. And those that sense that there's some kind of issues going on, a lot of times it's been my experience. I don't know what yours has been, but they like to blame HR. It's not HR's fault either. And because if HR had the tools and they had the training and they had the support, they would have already solved these problems, but they don't. And the problems aren't going to go away on their own. But the reason they don't get that support, i.e. the tools or the training, is because the CEO or the business owner doesn't even know these are issues. So
what are the common mistakes that seasoned leaders are making? And I'd be curious also if any stories of where a CEO was shocked to discover just how much money they were losing, and then what did they do about it when they realized it?
Couple things. Number one, I gave you the example of the business owner. We talked about employee engagement, but these folks that actually take the time to you know what, actually, I will tell a story. This was a healthcare company, about 1,200 employees. And the senior VP of HR, I've known for years. We served on boards together. And she literally went in. She had a meeting with the CFO and her leadership team. The president wasn't there, but everyone else on the leadership team was. And she literally went into her payroll, her exact payroll data that day, and entered that information into this calculator that we've got on our site that you can use for free. And the numbers were devastating. And when it came up, she literally showed this final report to her team, and they're like, oh, that can't be true. We're not doing that bad. We're not. And they went into, there's no way we would know this. And she's like, these are our exact numbers extracted from today's payroll. This is not a guess. These are our exact numbers. And they were blown away. It was huge. And as far as how to address it, one of my favorite stories is told by Tony Robbins in his book, Awaken the Giant Within. He talked about the story of this guy standing in the shores of a river, and he looks up and he sees this person getting washed down the stream in the current, hollering for help. So our hero dives in and he makes a daring rescue, and he pulls this drowning victim to safety, tends to his wounds, calls for assistance, looks up, and he sees 2 more people coming downstream hollering for help. So he dives in. He's exhausted already, of course, but he dives in. He makes 2 more rescues, pulls both of them to shore, tends to their wounds. No sooner does he lift his head, he sees 4 more people coming down the stream, hollering for help. The moral of the story is, had he just taken the time to walk a short distance upriver, he could have found out who the one person was throwing all these people in the river in the first place, and saved all his time, effort, and energy dealing with one single cause upriver as opposed to the many effects downriver. And what I think is that a lot of CEOs and business owners make the mistake of trying to solve their business issues from the shoreline. If you come to me and say, Mason, I've got a problem with employee turnover, then I'm going to say, hire people who match the demands of the jobs and the supervisors they're working for. Mason, I need to increase sales, then hire people who can sell. I need to reduce employee theft, then hire honest people. It's solving the problems before they occur. But businesses don't have the tools and they don't know how to do that.
So let's talk a little about the hiring and get into smarter hiring. Why is relying on resumes or just a basic interview or your gut instinct alone such a risky strategy when it comes to hiring?
Let me answer your question with a question, or a couple of them. Using your traditional employee selection methods, have you hired some good employees? Of course. I mean, yeah. Second level question, using those exact same methods and processes, have you hired some people you wish you hadn't? Third question, what's that taught you? If you're like most people, you've come to realize that what you're doing can't effectively help you predict success on a consistent basis. The odds are stacked against you. I mean, the government limits what you can ask, ties your hands there. Background checks only show you that someone's been caught and convicted of doing nefarious things. But what about the people who weren't caught or weren't convicted or weren't prosecuted successfully, even though they did things they weren't supposed to? You got applicants that lie on applications and resumes and interviews all the time. And yet, I saw an article, this was back in the day, said, I think it was Restaurants Institutions magazine, said 73% of job applications contain embellishments. I saw articles in Inc. magazine said 33% of resumes are embellished. So let's shoot right down the middle and say 50% of the information that you have as an employer to make an informed decision is embellished. Problem is you don't know which half, yet you're still responsible for making an informed decision. The deck's stacked against you. But what smart employers are finding out now is that, I mean, you can do drug tests too, but that just tells you that someone's smart enough to stay clean for 30 days because it usually says on the application or there in the front desk, hey, we drug test. People don't usually give out references of people that are going to say they're lazy or irresponsible. I mean, each of those, and am I saying you shouldn't do all those things? Absolutely not. I said, every employer, in my opinion, should do everything within their power to get as much job-related information as they possibly can legally get before they make a decision. It's like playing Russian roulette without checking all the chambers of the weapon first. And so, yes, you should do all of those things. So that being said, I saw an article in when I first got into this in business consulting, I saw an article in Selling Power magazine that talked about a Michigan State University School of Business on predicting success, did a study on predicting success in the workplace. And they said pre-employment testing was the number one predictor of future success by a 3-to-1 margin over interviews, past experience, and education for those reasons. So I think I think that's why the current people are just hire. It's a hire and hope because they get in a hurry. And there's that old saying, you hire in haste, you're going to repent in your leisure. And businesses just don't have the tools. They don't take the time and they don't have the training on how to make informed decisions, and it costs them.
So Mason, it happens, right? Especially middle management might end up with a hire and they're embarrassed to admit it wasn't the right hire. So they'll be like, I'll just train them. It happens all the time, right? You go into, I'm going to try to save face mode. And sometimes it works. most of the time it doesn't. I've heard you say in the past things like you cannot out-train a hiring mistake. Can you unpack that for us? Maybe because I've been there too. Like you hired someone's like, I can train this person. And then you realize maybe they're not trained. Sometimes it costs you your job as a leader trying to train someone who wasn't the right hire. Admitting I made a mistake, is harder, right? So can you out-train someone? Can you out-train a hiring mistake? Is that possible?
It depends on the role. If you've got someone who, let me break down. I'm going to actually set a stage for a little bit deeper answer. A lot of folks don't understand what the differences are between those who succeed and those who struggle in any position. What I want to know is two things. How does a job applicant match the job? And how do they match the supervisor? When it comes to matching the job, there's three things that I care about. Number one, skill. In other words, can they do the job? And that is something to a large degree you can teach, but I want to know that they've at least got basic skills. So, but to a degree, job specific skills can be taught and can be trained. Great. Second level question, number one, skill. In other words, can someone do the job? Second level is, will they do the job and why? We're talking about attitude and values here. And the third issue is behavior, which is a measure of how someone does the job. So let me talk about the second circle, if you will, attitude and values. Someone can have all the skill in the world, but if they're not honest, they're not reliable, they don't have a work ethic, I really don't care. Because they're not going to show up and actually do the work that you've taught them how to do. So if you can teach them, hey, you're supposed to show up at work, but if they don't have a work ethic, they don't value it, their parents didn't teach them that the job is a privilege and an honest day's work for an honest day's pay, and so on and so forth. They don't have that core set of values. Skill is of no value to me as an employer if they don't show up or they don't work hard while they're here. And then the third issue is behavior, which is a measure of how someone does the job. So if someone's being asked to come to work every day and be something they're not, one of two things are going to happen. Number one, they're going to quit and you're back to the turnover expense. Or worse, they're going to stick around, be unproductive, and make everyone else as miserable as they are. Neither of those are good options for an employer. So it's important to behaviorally speaking. And I could expound on that too. Take, for example.
Yeah, I'd be curious because, you can embellish a resume. You could miss the mark in terms of the ability for someone to. So what traits should leaders look out for? There's some specific traits that will trump, for example, maybe not having all the skills you need that become more valuable. What should they be looking for? If you can't trust the resume, you can't necessarily trust the reference. What can you trust? What are the traits, the characteristics of the individual that you should look for that you can trust?
I will touch on each of those categories. First one, skill. Can someone do the job? What I want to know at the very least is, do they have basic skills? Can they do problem solving? Can they do math? Can they do vocabulary, spelling? Because if they're interacting with customers, those customers, if I'm one of your customers, Tullio, and I come into your store and you're at the front desk and you don't have basic skills, I don't say, hey, what's the matter with Tullio? I say, what's the matter with this company? This company sucks. Because to me, my experience, you are the company to me. So, and just because someone has a diploma does not mean they've got an education. There are plenty of people running around who have diplomas that can't do basic math, can't do basic spelling, they don't have it. And I know that for a fact because I've seen it. And the last place you want to see that is happening in front of your ideal customers, because they may become former customers quickly if they have poor experiences because something as simple as basic skills. So let's talk about attitude and values. Will they do the job and why? I want to know, do they have a work ethic? Are they reliable? Are they honest? Because you can measure integrity, reliability, and work ethic. It's amazing what these industrial psychologists can do with pre-employment tests to discover these things. And what's the payoff if you can get that right? Hey, if I've got one employee going full speed because they've got a work ethic and they realize their job is a privilege, then that's the same output as two people going half speed for half the price. I mean, I think back, I'm going to expound on this. I was in the summer, I'm going to date myself, but minimum wage used to be $3.35 an hour when I was in college. And I got a job working at a factory. It was a union job during the summer, and pay was $9.80 an hour. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. When I got there, I got in the warehouse. I hustled and scrambled because I was ecstatic to have that job, and I wanted to be invited back next year. And I wasn't there a full shift before the union boys came aside and pulled me aside and said, look here, son, you got to understand something. I didn't even make it an 8-hour shift. Like, son, you got to understand something. You're going to be gone from here. You're going to be gone from here in 3 months. I remember this conversation was like it was yesterday. You will be out of here in 3 months. The rest of us aren't. And management has certain expectations about how much work can be accomplished in a shift. And you're screwing that up. You need to knock it off. I wasn't even there a full shift. So imagine a whole plant with that attitude. And companies are worried about labor costs. I could go off on a tangent. So that's your answer about the attitude and values. Will they do it and why? Third part is behavior. That's a measure of how someone does a job. I want to know, is someone organized? Are they sensitive? Are they assertive? What's their social need? Are they outgoing? Do they have a sense of urgency? All that stuff matters. And you may have, and it's very interesting, particularly when you start talking about engaging your existing workforce and getting more out of your existing staff, not just hiring, but how do you get more of your existing staff? Well, you put them in roles that allow them to do what they do best and like to do most, to be themselves. Jim Collins said it 20 years ago. He said the most important thing any business can do is get the right people on the bus and into the right seats. Unfortunately, he didn't tell them how to do it, and he didn't give them the tools. That's my wheelhouse. That's where I spend my days helping companies. But for example, you may have someone and I'll just talk behaviorally. If you believe in promoting from within, which I do, you want to promote from within, and you look and you see someone who's maybe they were a line employee and company comes along and says, hey, let's make them a supervisor. And everyone loves them. They know their job inside and out. They've got a good work ethic. And all of these traits and characteristics, they don't make any waves. They're a great team player. Maybe we can make them a supervisor because we know they're a model employee. Maybe they can teach others to be the model employee that they are. It's the Peter principle. The same traits and characteristics that made them outstanding in that role will doom them in a supervisor role. So let's just take a look at a couple of the traits. Let's say like social need, i.e. they want everyone to like them. They're sensitive. They're not going to say or do anything that's going to hurt anybody's feelings. And they're not assertive. Their assertiveness is very low, so they're very good at doing what they're told. So that's just 3 traits on the behavioral side. But those contribute to success in the role they're in. But now all of a sudden you're going to say, hey, we're going to put you in charge of these people who were your friends. And it's important for you to have everyone like you, to not get your feelings hurt or hurt anyone else's feelings. And you'd rather be told what to do as opposed to telling what to do. You're not going to take charge.
Yeah,
you've got the skill. It's going to be a disaster. And you're asking them to come to work every day and be something they're not. So that's why I talk about skill, attitude and values, and behavior. Can they do the job? Will they do the job, and why and how? And that's all job match. The other half of that equation is how do they match their supervisor, the team leader? You've heard the saying, people don't quit the company, they quit their boss. That doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen some of the time. And if you as an employer have the right person in the right position, they've got all those traits, and you're still getting minimum amount of effort to get by without getting fired out of them, chances are there's some friction between them and the supervisor or the team leader. And what's that relationship like? And that's the other thing I want to know.
Well, that's something that is actually the biggest contributor to those stats that we talked about with Gallup. Is everyone feels like a cog in the wheel. It's because most companies are operating under the Industrial Revolution operating model, which you needed to have very strict, rigid approaches to doing things. Otherwise, people would literally die. It was necessary. But in a world where the information age and knowledge worker, people don't want to feel like a cog. They want to impact. They want to be able to have some autonomy and agency. So to a certain degree, like you said, you might have the right hire, but then you've got a leader who's been taught to micromanage everything. That just marginalizes that individual to the point where they're disengaged.
Tullio, I think too, and we did a whole podcast on this, one of the big issues really becomes resentment. And that can be, we talked about, maybe you're training someone and you're just training, they're not getting it, but you're not doing anything about it, right? It just goes on too long and you get employees resenting that. Or, some of the attitudes that you allow to go on in a workplace. And if things don't get taken care of in some way, you build up that resentment. And then that's where I think really one of the main things where you see some of this stat move to that actively disengaged even, is when that resentment builds up. Mason, what are your thoughts on that?
Our very second show we ever did on the Bliss Business Podcast, we talked about resentment, the impact of resentment. You just reminded me of that. Yeah.
I can give you a very specific example. There's and I don't want to I'm not trying to promote our tools. I'm just, as a matter of fact, this does this, but imagine that you had a psychologist in the cloud that could take the personality of the team leader and team member and break it out and say, here's how these folks are going to interact, and here's where they're going to click, and here's where they're going to clash. That exists. It's called a team master, and here's how it is used in situations like what you described. Tullio, let's just say I am the sales manager and you are the leading sales rep on our team. And I was probably, for the sake of discussion, the great salesperson before, and I got promoted into this role for sales management, same as everyone usually does. Hey, maybe this guy can teach and show everyone else how to do what he did. And I may or may not be a great manager, but maybe I'm doing my role, whatever. It doesn't matter. My point is you and I sit down and it's annual review time. And we know how those usually go. Usually the team leader starts dictating the team member, hey, you need to improve this, you need to improve that, you do good here, you do good there. And far too often, the team member is just sitting there biting their lip, nodding their head, going along with it, just can't wait to get done with this because they know, well, they have several feelings. Number one, they're probably sitting there thinking, well, that's great that he can judge me like that, but he's sitting in his office all the time. I'm the one out in the field. If he was doing what I'm doing, he would understand that this, and this, but he's sitting in his office and I don't have the time or interest in explaining this stuff to him. I'm just going to agree with him, nod my head, and get out of this meeting, get my raise, keep my job. And within a few weeks or a month, things are going to be back to normal. And nothing changes, nothing improves. It's a waste of time. I'm going to propose an alternative way of having that conversation. If I'm your team leader, Tullio, I'm going to sit down with you and say, hey, man, I appreciate everything that you're doing out there. And I know you do a lot of great things that I don't even see because you make it look easy. I know there's some times where things come up and then I hear about it. And sometimes I do or don't need to get involved, but I know those are the exceptions rather than the rule. And I know you're doing a bunch of amazing things. And do I have some ideas and things that you might be able to improve upon? Maybe, maybe not. But I'd like to have an open discussion about what these might be and how I can best support you. And I might even go so far as to say, but before we get into that, what I want to do is I want to make sure our relationship is where it needs to be and our lines of communication are open. I'm not perfect and I don't expect you to be. But we did this tool, if you remember back in the day, that took a look at our behavioral styles, and it's supposed to give us some insights into what our working relationship's like. And I pulled it out to see if I had some blind spots. And I don't mind. I was wondering, would you mind going through this exercise with me so that we can make sure that we're on the same sheet of music? And now, instead of me judging you or instructing you, we're on the same side of the desk here, looking at some report, which is now a third party. Instead of me saying, hey, you need to do this, or you need to do that. I'm like, hey, Tullio, it says here that you need room to roam and I like to micromanage. I'm aware that I like to micromanage, but I've really made a conscientious effort to not do that. Have there been some areas where I've come up short? And
see, that's a beautiful review because you're flipping the script, and you're creating psychological safety in doing that too.
So here's the beauty of this, though. Yeah. I can say, am I doing this? And you might say, yeah, you are. And I'm going to say, I've really made an effort not to. Can you give me some specific examples of when I've done that so that I can get better? Now, one or two things can happen. One, you might realize I really can't. I know he used to earlier on, and you find out you're harboring some resentment towards me for issues that have long since passed. And you're like, you know what? I really can't. You haven't done anything along with it. And now all of a sudden our relationship's elevated. It's improved because what you were holding against me for a long time ago, you realize, no, he really has made an effort to improve on this and we're good. Or you say, you know what? Remember the holiday party you gave me this special project and you put me in charge of? Well, you were micromanaging that. And I'd be like, you know what? You're right. And now you feel heard. Our relationship elevates. Or I say, you know what? You're right, Tullio. I did micromanage that. And the reason that I micromanaged that was because you didn't hit the deadlines that were necessary. And then you look back and say, he's right. I didn't. I'll do better. The only reason he's micromanaging me here is because I didn't do what I was supposed to do when I was supposed to do it. That's on me. And again, now our relationship's improved. Or the other possibility exists that, yes, Mason, you're right. You did have to micromanage that because I didn't get it done on time. And the reason I didn't get it done worth of time is because you gave me 2 weeks worth of work and 3 days work to do it without any help. I tried to communicate that to you. And I look back at Tullio, you're 100% correct. Absolutely. I'll make it. So my point is,
you're not trying to judge or
right.
Like, let's find a common ground so we can both be successful.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's empathy right there.
It is. And it's done in a non-threatening way or a non-judgmental way. We're just facilitating a conversation, but we know where the conversation needs to be facilitated because, like I said, it's like having a psychologist in the cloud that says, here's Mason and here's Tullio and here's how they're going to interact. And now guess what? You're an engaged employee. I'm an engaged employee. And I'm learning to become a better supervisor with instant feedback about what I can do better to support you. We're both winning.
Nice.
That's what I'm talking about. Engagement and alignment and matching the supervisor, not just the job. And both of those things need to exist.
One of the things you brought up that I think is really powerful with that dealing with resentment was having people being seen and heard, and that a gratitude. And we do a lot of work internally to help with that. One of the things that I think really helped with us was this sort of, we've got some practices and rituals and systems, but one of those was this sort of peer-to-peer. That I think is, instead of me as a leader being the only one to be, hey, I see this person, I appreciate. It's like, hey, you got 40 people, right? And reduce friction. Well, what are some other ways do you think we can reduce friction? Hopefully, I'm coming through here. I see the signal breaking up a little bit.
Repeat the question, Stephen? I think you broke up a little bit. Maybe you could just repeat the question. Now it's clear.
Yeah, it was breaking up a little bit. But I was just talking about how we can reduce that friction internally. Whether it's resentment or not being seen, those kind of things. Or
I can address that. Like Jim Collins said, right people in the right seats. And where does the friction typically come? It comes when a person is not matched with their job and the job is actually asking them to be something they're not. It's like, I might be in the right shoe, but if it's the wrong size, I'm going to get blisters. I need to be in the right seat on the bus. And I'll just tell you how we've done it. I'm not saying that's the way everyone should do it, but if I work with an XYZ company, first thing I'm going to do about getting the right people in the right seats is I'm going to take inventory of who they have on staff. I use a behavioral tool that measures the traits that we talked about. There are no right or wrong answers. It's just a matter of, is someone right or wrong for what the job requires? In the same traits I was talking about: organization, sensitivity, assertiveness, flexibility, et cetera. So you take inventory of everyone, behaviorally speaking, what they bring to the job. Take inventory. Second thing I want to know, so that tells me who's on the bus, behaviorally speaking. Second thing I want to know is, what do the seats on the bus look like? Because it's not enough to have the right people. They got to be in the right seats. And the way to do that is to reverse engineer. Like we did this for a large company that had like 500 salespeople. We took their top 50 salespeople, top 10%, and we analyzed, behaviorally speaking, what their top performers like. So we reverse engineered what success and excellence looked like in that role, in that company, and in that culture. And that became the standard.
Yeah.
So now you know what the seats look like. And then it became a measure of saying, okay, now we take a look at our current employees and where are the gaps between what they bring to the job and what top performance requires. And now at a certain point in time, so now you have who's on your bus, you know what the seats look like. Now you can analyze those gaps and say, how can I, as a leader, identify these gaps and to provide each of these employees with the individual skill, the training that they need, or the support that they need to close those gaps. And that's what Collins was getting at with good to great. If you've got good employees who are doing a good job right now, you find out where the one or two areas are that the job's asking them to stretch beyond their comfort zones, be something they're not, and support them with people, tools, training, technology, and systems to support those areas. Now all of a sudden you've got a good employee who's doing great. You multiply that times all of the different employees and the different positions, and that's how you take a company. That's workforce alchemy. That's turning lead into gold and making people and departments and companies more valuable, and that's how you do it.
What I'm hearing, Mason, this is so powerful too, because quite often there's a lot of focus on how do we improve our conflict resolution strategy, right? But what I'm hearing is maybe the bigger question is, are people actually doing what they love doing and what they're best at doing? Because if they are, then they're satisfied. There's less likelihood to have friction or resentment, because usually it comes from unmet needs. And I think we have an audience question. We're running out of time, but it's very appropriate because I think it speaks to this. And the question is, Mason, can you share with us about the importance of the onboarding stage to boost ROI and culture from day one? And in line with this conversation, like sometimes there's so much focus on onboarding the person and inclusion and all that, but should there be a time where, in alignment with this question, where is it appropriate at that moment to say we hired the person to do this, but maybe they're really better at doing this other thing, and looking at where they're best seated in that moment? What are your thoughts on this?
I love that question. It's called imprinting. So let's just say, for the sake of discussion, to follow on where we started, let's just say that I have reverse engineered all of the major positions in my company. I know what it takes to be successful. I know what all of the seats look like in our company to be super successful. And I know who's on my bus. And my job as an employer or leader or CEO is to match the right people with those positions, to minimize friction and to maximize output, and to let them do what they do best and like to do most. So imagine this, Tullio. You're a new hire, and I'm just going to use sales as an example because I was using it earlier, but I just hired you for a sales role and you just started. First thing I'm going to say to you is, Tullio, I am so glad you're here. Let me show you why. I'm going to pull out the pattern of our most successful people and say, this is what it takes to be successful in the role we just hired you for. This is what our best people, the record setters, the ones that they're the best. And I want to show you something. You match this. And that tells me that you, just being yourself, naturally are a great fit to be a superstar here. And here's why. Now, there are a couple little areas that could delay your progress or make it a little more difficult, which is this and this. And here's what I'm going to do to help you so that this happens for you. Now, why would I have, it's called imprinting. It takes a minute to do. But here's why it's important, because number one, it establishes a self-fulfilling prophecy from day one that you can be outstanding here, not do a good job, but outstanding here, one of the best. The second level that I might do, I normally wouldn't go into this much detail, but I know you're keeping up here. I might say, and by the way, here's what other seats in the bus look like. So I see a potential career path for you where you can continue to grow in this company by learning skills and gaining experience. But behaviorally, we're going to put you in positions that allow you to be yourself and to succeed because of it. And oh, by the way, when one of these positions open up, you're not just getting evaluated by your existing job performance. Without knowing it, you're auditioning for these other positions when they open up, because we already know you're a fit. And you don't have to be the biggest voice in the room. You don't have to be the greatest self-promoter, because when these positions open up, our system will tell us, hey, here's who we have internally that match this seat. Here's who we have internally that match that seat. So you're not going to be overlooked. So
sounds like bliss, Stephen. Sounds like bliss.
So that's the answer. I mean, is that the answer you're looking for? But I believe in imprinting. When day one, I want to self-fulfilling prophecy. I want to establish a future vision. I want to let them know that, to inspire them to bring their maximum discretionary effort every day, because they're not just working for this paycheck. They're auditioning for the bigger one down the road. And they're not going to, and they may get considered, and the company may say, yeah, this person really does match this higher job, but they haven't put in the effort. They haven't learned the new skills. They haven't shown initiative or whatever. So, but at least they know what the deal is from day one.
Mason, I saw your arms go up a little earlier when Tullio mentioned loving what you do at work. That brings us to a question that we ask everyone on the show is some form of this is, what role does love play in business?
I don't know that I'm going to give you a knee-jerk reaction. And have you ever seen the movie Office Space?
Yeah.
It's a cult classic. It probably came out 20 years ago. And one of my favorite scenes is when people say, what does love look like? And what are the benefits of it? I can tell you what it's what the opposite of that is and what you want to avoid quickly. I remember the scene where the main character, Peter, is sitting in the conference room with the two consultants, the efficiency consultants, who are basically there to evaluate people's jobs and decide who to fire, for those who haven't seen the movie. And their names, interestingly enough, are Bob and Bob. He refers to them as the Bobs. But I'll never forget that scene where he says, he's sitting back in his chair and he's like, it's not that I'm lazy. I just don't care. If I bust my rear end and my company ships out an extra 10 units, I don't see another dime from that. But if I make a mistake, I got 8 bosses to come by and tell me about it. And that's my only real motivation, Bob. And Bob is, I don't want to get hassled. That or the fear of losing my job. But the fear of losing my job will only make me work hard enough not to get fired. That is relevant today as it was then, and that is why it is a cult classic. And it's attitudes like that and in cultures like that where these engagement numbers come from. And in organizations where there is love and there is respect and there is trust and there is the absence of friction, that's the love. That's the benefit of that. It's night and day. So, but in environments where there is love and there is trust and there is respect, those kind of conversations don't take place.
We agree. Well, Mason, it's been great to have you. We're up on time. We could continue this conversation. It's been a great conversation. Want to thank you for joining us. And for the listeners who want to connect with you, learn more about your work, where should they go? Well,
my books are on Amazon.com. My website is workforcealchemy.com. And at workforcealchemy.com, there's several things they can do. I'm also on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with people on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. But at workforcealchemy.com, there is a calculator that any CEO can actually utilize. The password is on the site, so they don't have to call in or anything. They can literally go in there, plug in their own data, and find out where their profit leaks are in their business. Second of all, we give them all different strategies and tools to help them address those. We have also a thing called the Workforce Alchemy Challenge, whereby, as in the spirit of giving, we can companies give people access to online training to teach them how to utilize some of the best practices and strategies that we've developed over 30 years working with small family businesses all the way to companies like Miller Brewing and Purina Mills. So strategies, tools, and if they pass our certification test, which they can take for free, we'll spot them a few $100s worth of assessment tools. They can actually apply everything they learned to make their business better, avoid hiring disasters, get the best people, and unleash the discretionary effort of their existing employees so they can not only learn the strategies, use the tools, and experience success without spending a dime. That's on us if they follow that path. But that's the Workforce Alchemy Challenge.
Nice.
Mason, thanks for joining us, and to our audience. Thank you too for joining us. If this episode has inspired you, or perhaps you know someone in your company that probably needs to hear this, please like, subscribe, and share. And we'll see you next time on the Bliss Business Podcast.